Welcome to ThinkTech, raising public awareness about technology, energy, globalism, and diversification. As part of the ThinkTech series, today's show is The Arts in Hawaii, coming to you from Pioneer Plaza at the core of downtown Honolulu. I'm your host, Donna Blanchard, proud managing director of Kumukuhua Theater, and joining me is my guest, Neal Milner, and today we're going to talk about Neal's book, The Gift of Underpants. Remember, we'll get to you in just a moment. Remember, we broadcast live on the internet at 2, 3, and 4 every weekday. All of our shows are streamed live on ustream.tv and Spreaker.com. And if you would like links to our live streams or previous broadcasts, go to thinktechhawaii.com. And if you'd like to join us in our downtown studio gallery for any of our shows, just write to j@thinktechhawaii.com. Now, my guest, Neal Milner, is a storyteller, actor, and playwright. Of course, none of these was ever his day job. Are you kidding? For 40 years, Neal was a political science professor at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, and has now published this book that, in all honesty, I must say, Neal, you're a friend of mine. I think the world of you, and you said you had a book, and I purchased it on my Kindle before you could even give it to me. I support you, but I didn't invite you on the show until I read the book.
Thanks for the vote of confidence, Donna. I'll make a note.
And then I texted you, and since I still have an Indiana phone number, I said, your book is great, Neal, and you texted back and said, who's this? And then I said, the book's great. I'd really like to have you come on the show.
Glad to be here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So let's talk about the title. Why would you name a book The Gift of Underpants?
Well, it's because it's really the title story, and it's one of the early stories that I wrote, and it's the story to me has a lot of the themes that I'm interested in the rest of the stories. It's really about living in the middle of the Pacific and having family living elsewhere, and the ways that families, the kind of small, unheroic but important things that families do to hold together. And I got thinking one day how often people give, especially in my family, underpants as gifts when they visit their kids. And the story is really about what that's like. And it's kind of, it's omiyage in reverse for here. That's one of the things that people would bring when we were younger and even as into adulthood. So I got interested in why it was such a important gift, what the significance of the gift was, and showed how it had operated in my family with my kids. Yeah. So when I went back and was putting the collection together, I thought, first of all, it's a good title because people like it, and I think maybe they think there's something pornographic about it, which might sell books.
Which appeals.
Yeah, it's fine with me. You'll buy it for whatever reason. But also because it seemed to me that it was a good introduction into the other series of stories.
Yeah, I agree. And it is, that initial story sort of encapsulates where you're going with the book. That is very humorous. It's the best of Neal Milner. But also there is, it's very poignant and it's warm, and a lot of it coming from the Midwest myself was very recognizable to me. But I think for any family, it really draws you in, and the humor is really wonderful in your story, and I was a little surprised when we really started getting into it and I saw the heart in it.
Well, partly that's the way I think about things, but also it seems to me that, and actually as a writer, the ability to surprise and the ability to move from pathos to humor is a pretty significant way of getting people's attention, and I know a number of people have mentioned that to me. But it's also how folks live. It's also about how many things seem to be funny but have more serious aspects to it, or how often people in serious conditions, serious situations, find themselves also doing funny stuff, like funerals, for example. The story that I have about funerals in there. So it seemed to me to be perfectly normal to write about the things I wanted to write about.
Yeah. I'd like to read a couple of those that I've outlined here, and even taken out of context, I think there's some some humor in here, but let me start with this one. Passover, were you talking about keeping kosher?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Passover ratcheted up my observance. Like almost every other Jew I know, I had my own unofficial dietary laws. These were not so much kosher light as kosher imaginative. These unofficial laws had no theological basis. They were erratic, inconsistent, and hypocritical. That's what made them so effective.
Yeah.
And you also talk about how your parents keeping kosher, they would eat bacon, but when it was sandwiched in tomatoes and lettuce. There's a really nice, your heritage is important to you. It's important to your family.
It's important to me, but I always wanted to write about it in a certain way that reflected the truthfulness of my family and that overcame what is one of the annoying things about storytelling, and that is this. Storytelling, the telling of stories, people who do it frequently tell their stories as if their family members are heroes, and as if they're facing large obstacles, and as if they learned stories at the feet of their grandparents, and these stories were moral tales. Well, that's certainly true. Certainly there are very important stories of heroes in families, very important stories about families overcoming big things. But I was more interested in the way that people who are not heroes are interesting. Well, I mean, my family's not. There's nothing heroic about my family. On the surface, they were pretty ordinary. They're funny, but in both an intentional and unintentional way. So part of what I was trying to do in that story is to talk about the ways that people adjust to stuff, not in heroic ways. No one in my family, and we had a big extended family that all lived around it. No one ever sat us down at our knees and told us stories about what it was like to be Jewish, or stories that would illustrate important moral tales. There was none of that. They did stories, they're kind of things you'd pick up along the way that were not meant to be stories. And so that was the orientation that I was trying to take, and that gets reflected in here. This is not about, this little thing here is not about trying so hard to keep my faith in a situation where it's being threatened. It's about the small but important ways that a lot of us had to keep true to ourselves, but to make adjustments.
To be able to get by.
To be able to get by, because we wanted to get by, not because anybody was forcing us to get by. Yeah. And so we had these kind of kosher imaginative rules that we had to that we had as ways of getting by.
And you talk a lot. I'm not going to read a quote from this because I couldn't find just a short quote that could encapsulate it. But all the difference between school and shul.
Oh yeah.
And the dances that you learned, and making do and being who you were while still.
Yeah. You danced.
Being who you wanted to be.
In B'nai B'rith Youth Organization, things where propriety and religion and culture were more important. You behaved one way in school for school dancing. You behaved another way, although you didn't always fit in the school dance setting. Yeah, that's another one of those examples. There's nothing heroic about it, and it's not like you're an anti-hero because you do it. It's the way life was. You had different places, you did different things, and you adjusted. So in a synagogue, when you went for social affairs, you behaved differently than you did in school when you're around a lot of people who are different than you are.
Yeah. Have you gotten any feedback from other Gentiles like myself? Perhaps some from here in Hawaii as far as how it resonates?
Well, the Hawaii reaction is always interesting because, and again, there's that story that I have in there about what it's like being a Jewish storyteller, even a Haole storyteller in Hawaii. People, for folks who grew up on the mainland and who were Jewish and from a particular milieu, not all of them, it has a little bit more of a familiarity. For people from Hawaii, they like the stories, but the same way that they would like stories that the Incas told. It's not their lived experience. They get it and they like it, but in a place where folks don't necessarily know that Cohn is a Jewish name, which is about as common as Jewish name as possible on the mainland, it doesn't make sense. And so people like it, but there's different layers of liking and different ways to look at the book and perspectives in there. And so that clearly is one. I know someone the other day said, he was Jewish. He read the book. His wife is local. He said, I really liked it. My wife likes it, but she has to struggle through the Yiddish parts. And it isn't like you have to know Yiddish. People who live in a big city on the mainland, even if you're not Jewish, would not have to struggle with the Yiddish parts.
Yeah,
Maybe
no problem.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. But as a storyteller friend of mine had said, that when you write stories here and you're using Yiddish names, think about it as sound. Don't think about it as having people have to understand it. And that's the way that I thought about it.
Well, yeah. There were some of the Yiddish words I wasn't familiar with. I hadn't heard, but you explain enough of it in the book. So I actually, for today, I wanted to have a quiz for you, have a list of words and ask you, is it Yiddish or not? So I was looking for those words that sound all verklempt and all of that. And I couldn't find any words that sounded that way that weren't Yiddish.
Well, schmata is one. Well, they're all Yiddish. Verklempt is Yiddish. They're all Yiddish. The difference is that in most American big cities, the fact that they get used on Saturday Night Live, use the word verklempt all the time, means that there's enough of those kind of things. Meshuggah, there's words. It's just if you're here, the vocabulary is a little less limited because people haven't grown up hearing that kind of stuff.
You don't hear. There aren't as many synagogues on this island.
Well, not. It isn't even. It's a kind of milieu where everybody uses those kind of words. I mean, the fashion district. If you're in New York City and you say schmata, the high style, the runway models are going to know what schmata is because it's a word that goes from rags to schmata means rags. It also means clothing, and it gets used as the schmata district.
So that So that's how they're getting it. I'm going to read another one of my quotes here, because you mentioned storytelling, and you gave me a very nice segue, so I'm taking advantage of it. I may be a haole, but because of my stories, I am not just a haole. Being someone with only partially understood stories is better than being someone with no stories at all. No librarian in Hawaii ever says to a haole, I need someone to do Caucasian stories. Tell them what it was like growing up rich and Episcopalian in Kenilworth, Illinois. I know rich Episcopalians from Kenilworth, Illinois. I've never asked them to tell me stories.
Kenilworth used to be the richest suburb in the United States, I think. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't even know that. So how did you? Let's talk about a timeline here a little bit. So you grew up in Milwaukee. At what age did you leave Milwaukee?
Well, I went away to college, all the way to Madison, 70 miles away when I was about 20. I stayed at home because I didn't have any money to go to college away from home for a couple of years. And I was there, I stayed for graduate school, and then I took a job, a year after we got married, I took a job at a little college in Iowa. And long story short, ultimately and surprisingly, I ended up out here at the University of Hawaii because they offered me a job. I never left any place because I was unhappy, and I was not drawn to Hawaii in any kind of dramatic way. I didn't know anything about this place. I mean, I was totally ignorant, I have to admit.
I was too.
And then stuff happened, and I've been here we thought we'd be here for a couple of years. We're here now for most of 40 years. Been away for a couple of years doing stuff. So, and that's a very important part of the way that I could never have written these stories, much of which involve Milwaukee and involve Florida, unless I lived here. I couldn't have written them if I lived in Milwaukee. I couldn't have written them if I lived in Florida, because living here had me see the tensions of trying to keep connections elsewhere, because this is such an isolated place. It's also a place with lots of extended family. But it's also, to me, a place where I can't get this right because there isn't really a good vocabulary. I'm an outsider here, but I'm an outsider in a way that I find very healthy, very stimulating for thinking about other places, and not at all discriminating. That's not what I'm trying to say about being an outsider. So the move, I couldn't have written, I couldn't have imagined and reimagined and remembered the settings that I did, or thinking about it that way unless I lived here. That's why these stories don't have a lot in them about describing Hawaii. But to me, they're written the way they are because I'm here and because how clear they make certain kinds of issues to me.
Because of that perspective, yeah. Okay, we'll be right back. We're going to take a quick break. This is the Arts in Hawaii on the ThinkTech Hawaii digital series. We'll be right back.
Aloha, I'm Jay Fidel of ThinkTech Hawaii. We have a program with the Hawaii Venture Capital Association on October 24th, Thursday, entitled Newsmorphosis 3 Online. Is our online news media doing its job? We have Jerry Burris for opening remarks, Howard Dykes is moderator, and a blue ribbon panel of journalists to discuss exactly what's happening in online news. Sign up at hvca.org and come on down and see us, network, enjoy the discussion, raise your awareness on ThinkTech at this program. October 24th, we'll see you there. Aloha, I'm Jay Fidel.
Hi, we're back and we're live. This is the Arts in Hawaii on the ThinkTech Hawaii digital series. And we are coming to you from Pioneer Plaza at the core of downtown Honolulu, which is also very near Kumukuhue Theater, just across the courtyard. I'm talking with Neal Milner, the author of this lovely, wonderful book, The Gift of Underpants, which the book itself is a great gift. And I'm going to say this, that we are going to be selling these at Kumukuhue Theater. We're going to be selling them on their own, but also as part of a Christmas package with a little subscription and some other fun stuff. And who doesn't like a little Yiddish around the holidays?
Well, and it's light for Santa to carry. It's only 127. So if one of the reindeers kind of conks out, 7 can definitely.
7 reindeers can hold it. It's a really nice beach read.
Yeah, it's pretty. It is, but because it's a series of stories, and so you can read one to go swimming, come back, and read another.
Yeah. Yeah. You go swimming.
It's not a very literary way to pitch a book, but that's what it is.
That's what
Prints
it is.
big, no graphs. Yeah.
And it's your lifespan and your parents, and it's an outlook for your children.
Yes, although I purposely never thought of it as a memoir in the sense of going from A to B, and so the stories do skip around a little bit. But you're right, it's clearly the last stories in there I'm writing from a very different perspective called Old. And the Walmart story and the story about planning for the past are both written late when I'm thinking about things in different sort of ways.
One of the most charming moments in there, I thought, was you talk about Jerry Seinfeld and his father,
Morty.
Morty.
Yeah.
And how you're either a Jerry or you're Morty, and you feel an older Jewish gentleman makes you feel like you realize, oh, I'm a Jerry. Yeah. And then a few pages later, your father basically is the same thoughts, your father-in-law.
Yeah. Yeah, that I have such a strong image of that moment on the elevator when I'm shirtless and I don't know what I was, 55, 60
something.
60 something, yeah, I guess that's right. And this guy's looking me over, and he's clearly close to 90, and he's kind of hunched up a little bit, and he says to me with envy, I used to have a body like yours. And it just, I mean, it just encapsulated so many things about how that made me continue to feel young, that I wasn't like him, and that someone had actually said something nice about my body. For, I don't know, maybe the 3rd time in my life. So that was really that, and that had a lot to do with my putting that kind of story together. I mean, the Florida stories were very much stimulated by particular events that just stuck in my mind, and then I began to think about the significance. The one about Eddie Fisher visiting and trying to pitch his book as that was the same kind of thing. When I was watching it, I just thought it was tremendously funny, and then I began
to tragic.
Think, well, it is, and but over time, as I began to talk to my mother-in-law about it, and how she reacted to the kind of music that that the people on the condo circuit get from the entertainers, I began to see the story in a broader sort of way.
I'll just say that you were visiting your in-laws in Florida in a retirement community, and there were performers Was it Simon or Garfunkel?
It's Art Garfunkel.
Art
His mother.
Garfunkel.
Art Garfunkel's mother lived there.
Yeah, and them not having an understanding of the community, and Eddie Fisher not having an understanding of the community, and sort of putting them all in one bucket that they did.
That's what Eddie did. I think what I was trying to say with Art is that ultimately he's singing that song because it's for his mother and it means something for his mother. The song is Yiddish Mother, Yiddish Mama, and how, unlike Eddie Fisher and all these other entertainers who kind of pass through that place and sing that song because they stereotype old people into thinking that's what they want to hear, when that's clearly not what this group of old people wants to hear. Right. Garfunkel's message was, at least as I imagine it, much more personal because his mother was there, and that's how I get into this whole thing about bridging the gap in age, and as he gets older and seeing his mother. I mean, just hanging around that community, which by no means was, this was a very well-off, beautiful-looking seniors living place that on the surface didn't look like a place at all, that just, to me, was just so full of interesting and funny things to watch. And so this is just a small part of it.
I like the way your brain works, because not only do you recognize the humor in the situation, but you have a really good memory for those facts and the names. And you also have a great hold on what is going on in current events that brings
I'm a trained social scientist, right?
Yeah,
that's true.
You're a triple threat, Neal.
Yes, I am. I'll just keep shaking my head affirmatively as you keep saying nice things.
I don't want to blow too much sunshine up your skirt here. I'm going to have to stop now because I have to deal with you.
No, go on. Maybe they can extend the show another half an hour.
I actually had sunshine blow up my skirt the other day. I was on the steps outside at
There's too much information.
And it was nice. That's what they're talking about.
Can we cut to a commercial?
No, because it's my show.
Oh, that's true.
So when did you? So you moved here 40 years ago. When did you consider yourself a storyteller?
Oh, not for a long time after that. That was actually, I started to think about it more in a Kumo play in about 1994. We were traveling with Kamau, and I can picture this. We were on the Big Island, and I was eating lunch at Cafe 100 with Naila Fujibab, and who's a great storyteller and also a very good actor. And I can still remember because we were the only non-meat eaters in the group, and so I was eating tuna, which was my compromise, and she said, "I want you to do some storytelling for me," because she's a librarian and did a lot of it. And I said, "Well, what makes you think I can do that?" And she said, "Well, everything you say always sounds like stories." And that was really the start, and then the rest of it is what happens is that I get involved with in that story about what it's like being a Hawaii storyteller. But initially, I didn't realize how much of this I had inside of me, how much of this was about connections between generations and the kind of way that my family operated. Because as I said before, it's not a heroic family. I didn't have issues with them. There was always a lot of humor, with intergenerational humor, because these people were immigrants that talked with an accent. As a kid, you just thought this was funny. So then I began to make connections. I began to write more, and I began to write more for reading than for telling. But I've told over the years, and I just collected them while I did other stuff and while I tried to write other things. And then over time, I went back. This was, 7-8 months ago. I took a bunch of them, went back and read what I had to see if I was going to do anything with them. And I picked out this group as the stories that I thought were the best. They all went through a pretty extensive editing process between what I saw then and what I saw now. So that's pretty much the way it worked. And there always is, I'm always an outsider storyteller here. And storytelling is very much, especially on the mainland, very much boxed in terms of ethnicity and race. You become a Hawaiian storyteller. You become a Japanese. There's a whole politics involved with that. And it drives some of the storytellers here nuts, because that's not the way they see themselves. Nyla is a good example. Nyla is on the mainland a Hawaiian storyteller. She's of many mixed heritages. She understands Hawaiian. She can do Hawaiian stories beautifully. But you fit it. So the category for me is here is a kind of exotic one, the kind of white Jewish guy telling stories. A white Jewish guy telling stories on the mainland is not such a big attraction.
It's Jerry Seinfeld.
Yeah, Jerry Seinfeld. That's right. No, and in fact, those folks are much more my role models. And Woody Allen is another one than the kind of traditional Fiddler on the Roof kind of storytelling thing. So that's it. That's it in a nutshell. And I think I've written pretty much all of the old stuff that I want to do about the family, and I'm trying to write about other kinds of things now.
Oh, you're working on another.
Well, I've written other stuff along the way, including trying to write things about local folks, and it took me a long time to feel comfortable doing that. Not in any kind of political correctness way, but I wanted to make sure that I could reflect the style of talking, not even so much pidgin, not just that, but the style of talking, the way they think, the way a 65-year-old local guy thinks if he loses his job, which is one of the things that I wrote this kind of a radio play about. The guy loses his. We did it at Dark Night at Kuma with Dan Secchi and Nyla and I, and we now have a musician that does.
There's something to look forward to.
Yeah, it's called Three Kinds of Shame. It's actually a lot of fun to do. He loses his job and he has to go to an employment agency, and he gets an invitation to go for an interview for a certain kind of job, and he thinks it's totally inappropriate. I'm never going to get it. I'm not even going to argue with it, and he gets it. And what happens and how you react to having to take a new kind of work that you don't want to take at 65, but by the same token, because you worked all your life, getting things done right is important to you. So, but that's more in the direction I'm going now.
Oh, we have that to look forward to, and thank you for a plug for
Kuma Theater. Sure.
Dark Nights.
Notice it was also a plug for me, but
I have no problem with that. We can throw that in there.
Does it sound like I do?
The book. We'll say something about the book.
Here we are. Yeah.
So you, back when you started telling those stories, when Nyla initially asked you to, you knew to start cataloging.
Well, I didn't think about it as cataloging. I just thought, I just started collecting, just started writing stuff. And at the time, my mother was, not only was she alive, she was sort of at that age when you're old enough so that you start getting, you start saying cranky things about the family and telling little secrets you didn't tell before. So I would write a story. Most of the stories don't get told. There isn't that big a venue for adult stories here. I'd put them aside. I'd write some more. I'd have a couple published in magazines. And I never thought as a catalog or a collection. And when I went back over them, I saw the themes that were there that I knew were there at one level, but I didn't realize how much they were there. And so I hope that people see them. And I didn't want to make it heavy-handed in the book.
It's not.
Yeah.
It's not. We're going to be right back. I am Donna Blanchard. This is the Arts in Hawaii on the ThinkTech Hawaii digital series. I'm talking with Neal Milner about The Gift of Underpants. We'll be right back.
We're full of useless segues here on ThinkTech Hawaii. You might be part of it. Maybe you'll catch something. Right. ThinkTech Hawaii is a non-communicable communication source. Don't get too close to your screen. You might be infected. ThinkTech.
Hi, we're back and we're live. This is the Arts in Hawaii on the ThinkTech Hawaii digital series. I'm Donna Blanchard proud managing director of Kumukuhua Theater, and I'm talking with Neal Milner, who is also a board member at Kumukuhua Theater. And let's talk about this. You're also a playwright. You're also an actor. You were in our last show. You're also a board member and an actor with Play Builders here in Hawaii, which I think is really nice. I know it's not even a possibility for board members to go out and work with multiple theaters, but I think it's really nice to have that kinship.
Yeah,
going
so do
on.
I. Yeah, and we share certain things in common that really make it nice to be on Kumu and Play Builders.
Oh yeah. And you are, you know, a political commentator that pretty soon, as the political season warms up, we're going to start seeing a lot more of you on network television.
Well, on local television for sure. Yeah, it always looks that. But the closer we get to campaigns and elections, the more they on. Although I now do a regular thing every other Wednesday morning on the Conversations. I do one of the segments on called The Long View, which is taking looking at politics, but not so much at what's happening on that day, but sort of context that inform that. So we did one last week. We got the second show's coming up this Wednesday.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Just can't get enough Neal Milner.
Yeah.
All right, so you looked at the catalog of, you didn't think of it as a catalog, but you had a body of work here and saw that this could become a book. You've written more like textbooks before.
Well, academic kind of books. I did a book a long time ago on the police, and I've been involved in writing and co-writing books about mediation, and I did a book, another one a long time ago, on the conflicts over sex education. So over the years I've done the academic kind of work, written about a variety of subjects. This is a very different kind of experience for me. It's a different kind of writing experience, but the big difference is the kind of emotional experience. It comes from a very different part of the brain. The other kind of work was reasonably interesting. It was academic work, and it's something that I'm proud of. But writing this kind of stuff, I guess one way of saying it is that when you do academic work, time never goes by real quickly. At least it never did for me. When I'm writing this stuff, I can say I'm going to revise a paragraph, and pretty soon it's an hour and a half gone by. And I prefer this. This writing helps me do other kinds of writing, because this writing taught me to be clearer and to be shorter, to be more concise, and to get people and to understand that you have to make whatever you're writing accessible to people, which academic writing is not necessarily the case.
Yeah. Can we talk about the master class a little bit?
Yes.
Speaking of your writing.
Yes.
I'd love to talk about that.
Yeah.
Lisa was a guest on the show.
Oh, really?
She was phoned in.
Yeah.
We had Lisa on the show. Got to talk a little bit about it from sort of a 30,000 feet view. I'd like to get more into the nitty-gritty of it, and this was a master class for writers, actors, and directors to collaborate on works focusing on kaka'ako, and we utilized oral histories from kaka'ako for inspiration. They didn't have to be literal at all. And Neal was one of the playwrights, and I had the pleasure of being one of your actors. And this is your surprise. I have a couple of lines here that Neal wrote. Yes, for the Holy Ghost, which was me, typecast. I know.
She was great. She was great.
Well, yeah, when something's written for you. That was a very cool thing about the master classes.
Oh, it was great.
You got a chance to write for those.
You have to understand it, from having nothing on paper and never gotten together as a group to have to produce a play in, 10 days, basically.
Yeah, it was
quite an experience. And because of the process, it was surprisingly easy. I was amazed at how confident I was. I'm not talking about the quality, but how confident I was I could put this thing on paper, because we were constantly testing it out.
Yeah.
Anyway, go ahead.
And you had to. Okay, yeah. So I pulled these because these are what, just as an actor, make me smile every time I think about them, because not many playwrights write this stream of consciousness. It's just that, I can't remember the accent. It's just that, well, I'm not going to stick my nose in deciding who's right and who's wrong, but to me, just to me maybe, I don't want to push it, but each of you has a pretty strong vision of what you want kaka'ako to be. Now that that's got Neal written all over it, but it's also, I'm thinking here, I'm trying really hard to get my sentence out, and there's such honesty in that.
I'm glad you see it that way, because to me, you have to write plays the way people talk. I mean, David Mamet is as good at this as anybody, but that sentence was, and it also turns out to be the way I talk a lot, ellipses and stops and so on. But I thought that's how she would say it. She's trying to be polite to two total strangers, and she's trying to help them, and she's got this impetus to stick her nose into their business, but by the same token, she doesn't think she should do that, so you kind of wander around a little bit.
And also, it's more than just remembering. I call it spirit because it's vaguer, more, I don't know, ethereal is the only word I can think of, than memory. Know what I mean? And as an actor, you get this line and go, huh, oh, nope, still not done. Nope, sentence is still going. Still have to,
You couldn't, if you wrote that line, I thought about it at the time, if you wrote that line in an essay, you would have to do all kinds of elaboration because it's so unclear. But if you say it in a play and the character, and it reflects the character, it becomes realistic that she can't make it any clearer than it is. That's the best you can do, and the audience is either going to go along with that to say, well, you know, what's the difference between ethereal and spirit and memory? You're either going to sell them on the idea through the actor or through the context of the play, or you're screwed. And that's where writing is different, and that's what makes it, in fact, harder, because you don't have that time when you're writing a play. I mean, I'm no expert playwright. I'm fairly new at it, but the first thing you learn is you got to get the exposition out, and you have to take chances sometime that things are going to be unclear because people are unclear. And you hope that the actors, which you did. I mean, I was thrilled with the cast in there. They're all very, very good actors because they just picked up on that stuff and just got it.
Well, yeah, it helps when you have the playwright and the director there working with you, so that you can say, Neal, why am I saying this? That the Holy Ghost. This is the Holy Ghost being written by a Jew from Milwaukee.
Yeah, I know. But I did play in that church. I had it right, and I do have a story about growing up in a neighborhood when I was so young. This story didn't make the book. The neighborhood was so Catholic that kids would start school at the public school and then go to the parish school after first grade, because the parish schools didn't have first grade. And there were so many kids in my kindergarten class who were going to go to the parish school that as an orientation the semester before, they took our whole class over there to visit the parish school. And I remember thinking, and again, it was not this big thing. My parents didn't make any big fuss. They never said anything about it. But I remember thinking, okay, so there's nuns out here, you know, and it's kind of interesting, but what the heck am I doing here? And that's that's my experience with the Holy Ghost.
That's your experience.
That and having a lot of Catholic friends who went to Catholic school in the 50s and 60s, which is not, if you listen to what they say, this is not exactly a statement in favor of Catholic schools. They were always talking about how much they got hassled.
Ooh.
Yeah, well, it was a tough time. I mean, it was tough love in those schools at the time.
Okay, we can't get into that now. We have to go to another. The breaks are gonna. We're gonna be flying out of here now because the conversation's too much fun. No more sunshine up your skirt.
Okay.
I'm Donna Blanchard. This is the Arts in Hawaii on the ThinkTech Digital Series, coming to you from Pioneer Plaza in the core of downtown Honolulu, and we'll be right back.
Aloha, I'm Jay Fidel, founder of ThinkTech Hawaii. We are a digital media nonprofit that covers things that matter to tech, energy, diversification, globalism, and progress for our state, the state of Hawaii. We broadcast on community television and on Oceanic Cable Channel 16. We also stream our shows and interviews live on the internet as both radio and video, and of course we post them here on YouTube. We collaborate with the Hawaii Venture Capital Association to present monthly luncheon programs on subjects of interest to the business community. And we write for the Honolulu Star-Advertiser. ThinkTech works hard to raise public awareness in Hawaii. Check out our website, thinktechhawaii.com, and come to our YouTube channel, ThinkTech Hawaii. We hope you support our mission and that you like our work. I'm Jay Fidel. Mahalo.
Hi, we're back and we're live. I'm Donna Blanchard, proud managing director of Kumukuhua Theater. This is the Arts in Hawaii, and I'm talking with Neal Milner. We're talking foremost about his book, The Gift of Underpants, which is available on Amazon and, coincidentally, at Kumukuhua Theater.
And Native Books.
Oh, and Native Books, sorry.
Yes.
Kudos to Miley Meyer. I'm going to read another quote just because I love it. I've got two more that we have to squeeze in, and then we can
squeeze away.
Then you can take over the interview again. I knew I wasn't going to have to worry about finding anything to talk about. Okay, our neighborhood was full of, this really spoke to me as a Midwesterner, because you could have been describing my neighborhood also. Our neighborhood was full of Irish, Italian, and German families, cops, plumbers, tool and die makers, bus drivers, firefighters, school teachers, a few other white-collar workers, Chevys and Fords, and an occasional Buick. From curbs, large elms shaded these modest homes with their meticulous yards. Meticulous, the patron saint of Milwaukee neighborhoods. Both total strangers and close neighbors judged you by how you kept up your lawn in the summer and your sidewalk in the winter. Now that is something that when you talk about the layers, how it's going to resonate with us, here you mow your lawn, once a month. In the Midwest during the summer, you have to keep a nice lawn, you have to get out there and work on it every week. It's a different type of grass that grows much more quickly. And shoveling that snow in the winter it's work. It's a lot sometimes it's literally back-breaking work.
Yes. Heart attack causing work.
Yeah. And your yard becomes a statement of how you feel about your community and your pride in your family and everything else. There's so much more that goes into it. This is couched in, a few Chevys, some Buicks, but that really spoke to me. I thought that was a lovely.
Well, I think that's right. I think it's the layers people are pretty careful here and do a lot of weeding. By the way, don't forget taking out the crabgrass. You didn't wait a week between crabgrasses.
Yeah.
Now, my father was, I'd once tried to convince him, why think of it as a weed? Just think of it as another colored grass. But it really was a sign of your moral status. There's a term in anthropology for thinking about homeowning, that homeowners are considered, you want to be considered settled. A homeowner is someone who's settled, who has a good moral character, is there, doesn't cause trouble, takes care of his lawn, and shovels his snow. The snow shoveling is a bit for safety. The lawn thing doesn't make any difference, but it was very clear. My father was very clear. That was taken for granted, that people looked at a house, looked at how many dandelions were on the lawn, how much crabgrass was there, how high the grass was cut, and if it didn't meet the standards, you were really considered morally bereft.
Yeah.
And it's still, the city still is like that, I think. The city looks different in lots of ways, but it still is a city of very neat neighborhoods. Doesn't have flowery English gardens for the most part. There's some beautiful botanical gardens. It's a wonderful city for parks, but the houses have marigolds, rose bushes, and the flowers are arranged neatly. They're all border flowers, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I can remember, just to add to that, I can remember as a kid being sent over to mow the neighbor's lawn because someone in the family was sick.
Yeah.
So they're good people, but they just can't take care of it now, so we're going to help them. It's all.
Well, my first job was cutting other people's lawns, which I was much more willing to do than cut my own, because I wasn't getting paid to cut my own. Yeah. So we had, when we were 13 or 14, we were in partnership on a lawn mowing business, and you just went around the neighborhood and did a serviceable, if not a good job doing it. Yeah.
Well, and I think it eventually, in some neighborhoods, became, who can you afford to pay to take care of your lawn? And then that has its own visual appeal.
Yeah, these are small lots, right? You didn't have gardeners. Or whatever you want to call people here. You had kids, right? You had families. Yeah, maybe a neighbor kid, but you didn't. There were no trucks driving around with with gardeners. There were no ethnic groups who worked as gardeners. There wasn't any. You couldn't. Well, first of all, half the year you're in any garden because of the snow. There just wasn't that kind of thing there. So it's all pretty much families taking care of their own, or getting some neighbor kid and paying them at the time, probably $1.50, $2 to cut the lawn.
Yeah, but it was something.
Yes.
I want to. Would you like to read this one? The one about Shmata Row?
Oh, Shmata Row. Let me see. Okay, let me put my glasses on just to make sure.
I didn't realize we required prep for this one. Just a moment, please. Stand by. Stand by
yeah,
the booth.
This is
we'll
prep.
be right with you.
Yeah, I got to get my lower voice. Okay. First of all, you have to understand Shmata means rags or clothing, but Shmata tends to mean a place that is kind of crappy looking and also that sells clothing, and this place was both. This is something that had happened in Florida. A perfume shop in Shmata Row. Oh, the name alone. A collection of small discount stores in a rundown strip mall in a desolate, dirt-poor neighborhood in Hollywood, Florida. Then, by the way, let me ask you something. What kind of schlemiel would build that thing in your neighborhood, in that neighborhood? It's like Henny Youngman's brother-in-law opening a tall man shop in Tokyo, which is an old Henny Youngman joke, actually. Anyway, an old lady is spritzing and re-spritzing a sample bottle of perfume. As the mist spreads throughout the store, she argues with the salesman about whether the discounted perfume is really fresh. Lady, the salesman finally says, it's cologne, not fish. Okay.
Thank you.
That's part of a series of vignettes funny stuff that happened when I was down in Florida that kind of showed old people at their funniest, and then I take a second look at what those stories mean later on in the story. But if you took the most run-down strip mall in Hawaii, take your pick, because there's many of them that look bad in Honolulu. You made it even more run-down. You had a railroad track nearby, and you figured out what kind of stores would move in there. That's what Shmata Row was like. But of course, it meant that small-time discounters would go down there, and bargain hunters like my mother-in-law, who might be willing to travel, I don't know, 1,000 miles to get something to wholesale. We'd go. It was like an outing when they were still getting around pretty well. It was about 10 miles from the house. It wasn't just straight down the freeway, and that's what Shmata Row was like.
I love that. I completely lost my train of thought listening to you tell that story.
You see what I was like when I taught at UH. Yeah.
Great. But how long did you teach it?
Oh, well, I had a couple times I had other jobs there for a short period of time, but I started there in the fall of '72. And so if you consider the years I was away on sabbatical or special projects and the years that I had other jobs, I probably taught 35 years of actual teaching, of actually having students to experience me.
I wonder what it would have been like to be one of your students. I think that in this book... and
Ask Robbie Allen, by the way.
Oh, Robbie Allen is one of your students?
Yes, one of my earliest, yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. I will ask him. In the show that we did for the master class, I thought that you did something pretty amazing in there. So the gist of the story was the Holy Ghost comes into Kaka'ako and is trying to create some peace between generations, and utilizing the Holy Ghost Festival to try to get there. But you did something that was, I thought, pretty fearless. Was you had one of the lines was, here I'm trying to say it's more spiritual, you know what I mean? And the Hawaiian says, my mother's from the big island, don't talk spiritual to me. And then you have the Holy Ghost saying, ugh, you know, what can I that could have put a very fine point on a big issue, but you did it so very gently that I think it was so palatable for everyone for it to just wash over and say, yeah, that sort of thing.
That's what it was, yeah. I mean, I think it was also consistent with what the character was like. That was, I mean, that whole issue of writing about Kaka'ako comes the closest to writing in theater form some of the things I was interested in as an academic that I'd written about, the politics of space utilization here. I'd done a lot of writing about leasehold controversy and about what happens when you build condominiums and about the Kalama Valley land disputes. And so I, for a long time, have been thinking about ideas of what's called imagined space, where it's not just what you own in a legal sense, but it's what you imagine is yours. And that's part of what was happening in the story, that the auto body guy who doesn't necessarily own the land, but has so many memories there and so much at stake, and has really made the land into something. that becomes an important factor there.
And the younger generation, also a very caring,
Yes.
thoughtful man, having a lot of difficulty understanding that concept and basically telling the Holy Ghost to don't talk to me about spiritual.
Yeah.
Good. I'm really sorry that we have to wrap this up. Thanks.
It was
being
fun.
here.
Sure. Anytime.
Okay, there again, I just don't want to have to wrap it up. I'm Donna Blanchard of Kumukumu Theater. Really happy to have you here. This is the Arts in Hawaii on the ThinkTech Hawaii series. I would like to thank Neal Milner for being here. Thanks also to our production manager, Ian Davidson, our communications director, Chrissy Goffigan, and to Jay Fidel, who somehow puts this all together. Thank you, our watchers and listeners. Come back next week. We'll be talking with Ed Bourgeois, who is the managing director of the Pa'i Foundation. To check out our previous broadcasts, go to YouTube. On YouTube, just go to thinktechhawaii.com, and please like us on Facebook.